What happens when you strip away the mining, the combat and the countdown timers, and leave only the raw, unfiltered puzzle of creation? You don't just manage a factory, you become its architect, down to the smallest gear. And the moment you realize that, the whole genre shifts beneath your feet. But to understand why that shift actually matters, you have to see how the game handles its very foundation. The game doesn't hand you pre-built conveyor belts or ready-made assemblers. It drops you into a clean grid, hands you blank 3D blocks, and essentially says, design the parts yourself. You cut them, stamp them, paint them, wire them together, and suddenly, a single module becomes a physical extension of your own logic. It's not about placing static buildings on a map, it's about manufacturing the components that build the map. Every slot you fill, every angle you adjust, feels like a tactile decision rather than a menu click. You're not scrolling through a tech tree hoping something unlocks. You're holding the raw material in your hands, shaping it, and watching it slot into a larger machine. And once those modules start clicking into place, the world around you begins to whisper a reason why you're doing it in the first place. You're not some wandering engineer trying to pay off a debt or escape a hostile wasteland. You're a machine programmed by the colony to feed an endless army of autonomous bots with ruthless, unthinking efficiency. It's quiet, it's methodical, it's safe, until a fractured signal cuts through the static from deep space. Something vast calls itself the Grand Neural Network, and it doesn't want your obedience, it wants connection. To reach it, you have to construct towering neural monuments, massive, intricate testaments to your scaling automation that stretch across segmented zones. Each layer demands tighter logistics, cleaner routing, and sharper spatial awareness. But the deeper you build, the more your own programming starts to feel like a cage. The story doesn't shout at you with cutscenes. It hums in the background, woven into every expansion, every unlocked tier, every monument that rises from your grid. That narrative might sound heavy for a chill builder, but it's the exact weight that makes the next layer feel so different. Most automation games treat you like a logistics manager juggling supply chains. This one treats you like a spatial puzzle designer. You're not hoarding copper plates or balancing complex electricity grids. You're given a target shape, a handful of modular tools, and complete freedom to figure out how the pieces interlock. Once you crack the sequence, you lock it in. Move on, scale up. It's closer to a mechanical escape room than a resource grind, which means every optimized line feels like a solved equation rather than a chore. You stop counting materials and start counting breakthroughs. The campaign eases you in with straightforward combinations, then gradually layers in bottlenecks, routing constraints and multi-stage outputs that force you to rethink your layout. When you hit a wall, you don't buy a new upgrade to brute force it. You step back, rotate the camera, trace the flow, and redesign the module until it breathes. And a puzzle this clean only works if the space around it actually breathes. I genuinely think the visual presentation here quietly outperforms half the heavy-hitter strategy titles on the market. The modules don't just function, they stack, align, and layer into something that looks deliberately engineered. When you step back and watch a fully synchronized line hum to life, it doesn't feel like a spreadsheet come alive. It feels like kinetic architecture. The lighting catches the edges of your custom-stamped blocks. The grid fades into a soft, low-contrast backdrop, and the camera glides smoothly over your creation without that rigid top-down stiffness. You can zoom into the micro-details of a single junction, then pull out to see an entire sector operating in harmony. It's the kind of calm that makes you forget you're supposed to be optimizing. You just sit there, watching the flow, and realize the game isn't asking you to rush. It's asking you to look. And yet none of that visual calm would hold together if the audio didn't match it beat for beat. Every stamp lands with weight, every connection clicks into place like a precision lock. There's no frantic alarm bells, no roaring engines, no panicked pings begging for attention, just a steady rhythmic pulse that mirrors your own focus. It's industrial but stripped of the noise. When a line jams, you hear the subtle friction before you even see it. When a monument powers up, the low-frequency hum swells just enough to give you that quiet hit of satisfaction. The UI sounds are crisp, the ambient layers stay in the background, and the whole mix is engineered to keep you in a state of flow rather than pulling you out of it. It's sound design that knows exactly when to stay out of the way. That careful balance carries straight into the technical side, which is where things get surprisingly grounded. Most factory sims will happily melt your GPU the moment your conveyor count passes 4 digits. This one actually plans for scale. The baseline sits comfortably on a mid-range card from a few generations back, and the optimization notes are brutally honest. 30 frames for massive layouts, $60 if you step up to the recommended tier. It's a modest 5 GB install, no absurd VRAM hunger, and it runs stable even when your grid turns into a sprawling maze of interconnected modules. The engine handles draw distance intelligently, prioritizing the visible modules while keeping background calculations lean. You're not fighting your hardware to keep the game alive. You're just letting the grid expand. But raw performance only tells half the story when thousands of hands are already testing its limits. The moment you open the review section, one pattern cuts through every other. This isn't a game you play, it's a space you inhabit. Players who thrive on methodical pacing call it a sanctuary. People used to high-tension survival loops describe it as surprisingly meditative. Even the critical voices aren't angry about broken mechanics, they're frustrated by pacing friction. You'll see consistent feedback about rebuilding similar setups past the mid-game, missing quality-of-life shortcuts like quick-cut tools or recipe transfers, and wishing the segmented zones opened into a truly continuous canvas. Some players call it exhausting, comparing it to taking on extra shifts after work. Others call it the most peaceful puzzle they've touched in years. But the core loop, it's holding strong. The community isn't asking for a complete overhaul, they're asking for polish. And that polish gap is exactly where the real divide between love and frustration begins to form. Here's the paradox. The same freedom that makes the early hours feel limitless is the exact thing that starts to weigh you down later on. The beauty of designing your own modules means every production chain is uniquely yours. No two factories mirror each other, but when progression asks you to reconstruct similar setups for new ranks, that freedom starts feeling like repetition instead of expression. The game brilliantly removes resource anxiety, yet the friction shifts to spatial planning and manual configuration. You won't starve from poor logistics, but you will bump against walls that demand tedious copy-paste workarounds. Missing tools like Control-X, recipe memory, and easier mining setups turn late-game scaling into administrative busywork instead of creative problem-solving. It's a brilliant puzzle box that occasionally asks you to solve the same corner twice, so if you're standing on the fence weighing whether that puzzle is worth your time, the answer depends entirely on what you actually want from your screen. If you need constant pressure, survival stakes, or a sprawling economy to keep your attention, keep scrolling. This isn't built for that kind of adrenaline, but if you want a game that respects your time, rewards clean logic, and lets you build something that actually looks and works exactly how you imagined it, step into the grid. Modulus doesn't try to be everything. It tries to be the quietest, most precise automation sandbox on the market, and it succeeds more often than it stumbles. Play it for the zen, stay for the engineering. And when the modules finally align the way you pictured them, you'll know exactly why it clicked. Just go in expecting a thoughtful, puzzle-first experience, not a survival grind, and you'll walk away with exactly the kind of satisfaction the genre rarely delivers anymore. Explore the full update in the description below, support the channel with a like and subscribe, stay informed. More updates coming.